Here are a few things to look out for when buying a new home. Hi, my name's Gustavo Larrea, and today we're going to talk about a few things that you can look out for when you're searching for a new home. This means when you're going to visit any homes on a showing, things like that. So let's get started. The first thing that you want to check out is the exterior of the house, mainly the roof. The roof is one of those things that obviously, if built right, can last a long time. General roof nowadays lasts about 30 years or so. With that being said, sometimes they have to be maintained. So you want to look, these are the key things that you really want to look out for. You want to look out for loose shingles. You want to look out for any, damage to the roof. You want to look out for any shingles that might be flaring up, just peeling up like this. And then when you go into the house, you want to look at the ceilings. You want to see if there's any leaks. Usually a leak is an indication that there's a hole in the roof. Now, does that mean you have to replace the entire roof? It actually does not. Most of the time, these things can be fixed with simple patches and stuff that costs very minimal money. However, a roof that's really old that will need replacing at some point, you definitely want to look into finding a good roofer. Generally, you can find a roofer that'll do the whole job for $8,000 to $10,000. The next thing you want to look for when you're searching for a house is you want to check out the boiler and the furnace. The things you want to look out for on these particular appliances is that the furnace, you want to make sure that it's in good working order. You want to make sure that the heat is blowing very good. That, if there's an AC unit, you want to make sure that's working good. With the boiler, you want to look for any potential rust on the bottom. Nowadays, they have these electric units that are little boxes that replaces all this stuff. However, with most houses, especially in Long Island, they're going to have a big old boiler. If you see any type of rust on the bottom, you want to make sure that you replace that boiler immediately, because that water heater is going to blow and potentially flood your basement, which would be, a big pain in the butt. Okay, before we move on with the rest of the video, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. It absolutely helps the channel. It helps me to make more of these videos. And obviously, if you're getting value from them, you want to help the channel out. So definitely hit that like and subscribe button. So one of the things that you want to also look out for, at least on the outside of the house, is the grading. The grading is basically topsoil that is put up to the house that allows for any type of rain flow to push water away from the house. So grading around the house is very important. What you don't want to have is anything that's sloping towards the house. And again, sometimes you're going to have that. So you want to make sure, at the very least, if you have one of these houses, that everything slopes down. In Suffolk County, you're going to see this a lot. But you want to have sources where the water can shoot away from the house. All right. So one of the big things I always look for is, when I enter a house, is the house messy? A messy house is generally an indication, or can be an indication, of how the house was actually taken care of. Now, there are two kinds of messies. There is kids messy, which we all know all kids are messy, especially if you have little ones, and that's okay. That's usually not an indication. But adult messy is a very different story. If there's, stacks of newspapers, or there's cans all over the place, or if the house is just generally being kept in a bad state, messy wise, it's not clean, that is always an indication that they're probably not maintaining the house as it should be maintained. When this happens, I always make sure to have close inspection of the property and see what, other things may be wrong in the house. Okay, so one of the next things we're going to talk about is the HVAC system. If there is an HVAC system, you want to go on the outside of the house or wherever they're keeping the central unit And you want to make sure that it's in good condition. There's no rattling, there's no clicks. You want to make sure that there is no rust on the outside. As far as the venting goes, generally when it rains, you're going to get some water in there. But if you see excessive leaking and stuff like that, that's something definitely to look out for as well. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to go into the basement, and I really actually just take a breath of air. I'm looking for certain things. I'm looking for musty odors. I'm looking for indications of mold, and you can smell mold. When mold is present, you can smell it, in which case you definitely want to cover your mouth. But these are all indications that there could have been water in the basement, that there is moisture collecting, and these are things that you may want to address. If I smell any type of musty or moldy odors, I immediately take a look at the whole basement. I look on the walls. I'm looking at the floors. A lot of times in the old houses, especially on Long Island, they used to make like little trenches against the wall, and any moisture that would collect on the walls would drip down and go into the ground. Now, this is not, something terrible to have. However, it could, sometimes you get bugs that'll come out of the ground in the summers, in that. But being that most of Long Island, was woods and wooded areas and hills and stuff like that, you're going to get some crickets and stuff like that. Regardless, it's nothing to be alarmed about. However, the mold is, and if you do have that, you definitely want to get that cleaned up, and you want to have a specialist come in to take a look at that. So on the south shore of Long Island, a lot of the homes are in flood zones. And whenever they have basements, one of the first things I ask is that during Hurricane Sandy, was there any flood damage? Was there any water in the basement? Anything like that? Um, Especially in the South Shore areas. Again, when we got hit by Hurricane Sandy, most of those houses flooded. So that's definitely a question that you do want to ask. Now, one of the other things you want to find out is there a sump pump in the basement? Is there something to pump water out if it were to get flooded? Another thing I like to look for is a French drain. If you don't know what that is, it's basically just a simple drain that is located on the floor, and basically the basement floor is pitched so all the water goes into that drain. These are things you want to look out for, and questions you definitely want to ask when looking for a house, especially in any type of flood zone area on Long Island. So, one of the other things that I like to look for is the floors. I look at the floors. I'm looking at, are if there's carpet, are there hardwood floors underneath? Is there any type of water damage? If it's, one of those cheap floorings from Home Depot, is anything peeling or are corners coming up? If it's linoleum, I mean, honestly, I just replace all that. So these are things that I look for my clients when they're looking to buy a new house. If there's any water damage on the floors, a lot of times, if the floor is not warped or anything, most of the time on a wood floor, it can be saved. It's very simple just to get a sander in there, to sand any stains out, sand, any type of thing that's going on with the finish. So you sand it, you get it finished, and then it looks brand new. So these are like little things that I look for as well. Another one of the things that I like to look for is the materials in the house. I like knocking on walls. I like, shaking banisters a little bit. I want to know the quality of how the house was built. Now, most of the time, especially with the older houses, I mean, they built them to last. Um, what I look for most of the time is in the newer houses. Now, people are like, "Oh, new construction, this is already good to go. It's better than having a old house," and lots of times that is true, but For some of these flippers out there, you know, they're looking at their bottom line and they're looking to do it at the cheapest possible price. So the things that I look for on a new construction is I'm pressing down on the floors, making sure that you know, nothing's rattling, that the floor was put in right. I'm looking at the doors. If the doors are hollow, like if I'm knocking on a door and it's not solid and it's a piece of hollow wood, that is a huge indication that some cheap materials were used. And at that point, you know, you know when a flip job is really bad or when a house was built really bad simply because of these little things. One of the biggest things I look for when I'm buying a house or when I'm helping somebody buy a house is I'm looking at that electrical panel. That electrical panel sometimes can be very old if the house is very old and may only be 100 amps to 150 amps, which was adequate for the time, especially like in the 50s and 60s when a lot of the houses on Long Island were built. But for nowadays, with all the new appliances that we have out, the phones, all the computers that we have charging, you kind of need to up the ampage. So most houses now will have a 200 to 250 amp panel, and you can recognize if a panel is good or not. You could just look at it and see if it was old or whatnot. But upon inspection, what they generally do is they take the actual panel off and they take a look at the switches and the wiring and stuff like that. And they can tell you, you know, what you need to do moving forward. And then the last thing that I look for is I look at the actual block. Are there a lot of houses for sale? Are people happy on the block? I talk to the neighbors. I find out a little bit about the neighborhood. Find out a little bit about the neighbors. Um, a lot of houses for sale on the block is not a good indicator. It usually tells me that people want to leave for some reason, and I try to find out what that reason is. So definitely want to check into that because if you're going to move into a house, for most people, this is going to be their biggest purchase ever in their life, and they're planning to stay in that house for a substantial amount of years. So if you're going to be living in a house that long, you want to make sure that the neighborhood and your neighbors are okay.